Today was their last witness that they brought to the stand in the case against Paul and Ruben Flores.
Paul Flores waking up behind bars, accused of murdering college student Kristin Smart nearly 25 years ago. On Tuesday, police also arresting Paul's father, Ruben, as an accessory. Police say they found evidence there, but have still not found her body. Smart's family has been hoping for answers for decades.
For years, Kristin Smart's face hovered over traffic in Arroyo Grande, California. Haunted by her stolen innocence, Chris Lambert bravely set out to uncover the enduring mystery behind the billboard. His curiosity for justice helped break the ice off a 2-decade-old case. Hi, I'm Michael for Mysterious 7. Today we look into how Lambert's podcast finally brought an arrest in Kristin's case. In the early hours of May 25, 1996, Kristin Smart vanished. She was last seen at 2 a.m., allegedly intoxicated and passed out on a neighbor's lawn. 2 fellow students offered to help, unable to ignore her sorry state. A third, Paul Flores, stepped in to help, as he lived nearest to her Muir Hall residence. She was never seen again. Her trail went cold. For 2 decades, Flores' name continued to pop up on investigation radars. Despite an array of items of interest, no solid leads panned out. Kristin's disappearance sparked a change in legislation, ensuring safety for future students. Stan and Denise Smart welcomed Kristin Denise Smart into the world on February 20, 1977. She was born in Augsburg, Bavaria, in West Germany. Kristin's parents were both teachers at the time to children of American military personnel. When she was still a young child, they eventually moved back to Stockton, California. The eldest of 3 children, Kristin's mother Denise called her a dreamer. According to her family, Kristin had a great love of the ocean and an adventurous spirit. She had a real zest for life. Kristin graduated from Lincoln High School in Stockton in 1995. Prior to attending university, she worked as a lifeguard and camp counselor at Camp Mokuleia in Hawaii. In 1996, Kristin enrolled at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California. She had high aspirations, but was also indecisive. Initially, Kristin enrolled at Cal Poly to study architecture. She loved drawing. Later, she changed her major to communication studies. Denise said she wanted to be the next Joan London, traveling the world as a reporter. Memorial Day weekend 1996, Kristin called home and left a voicemail. Good news, I'll call home Sunday. The call never came. Like clockwork, Kristin checked in with her family every Sunday, but for the Smarts, all communication ceased that faithful weekend. Friday night, Kristin attended an off-campus birthday party. Her friend, Margarita Campos, recalled dropping her off. Campos said that Kristin seemed a little mad because she didn't join her for the evening. The last thing she said to Kristin was to be careful. Temperatures were warm, and Kristin wore a cropped gray t-shirt, black surf shorts, and red Puma sneakers. Witness statements from the party varied. Some alleged she was extremely intoxicated. Others claimed she didn't drink at all. Some believed she was possibly given a date rape drug. On May 25, 1996, at 2 a.m., fellow student Tim Davis spotted Kristin passed out on the lawn next door. Together with Cheryl Anderson, an acquaintance of Kristin, they both helped her walk back to her campus dorm, Muir Hall. It was then Paul Flores reached the group and offered to help take Kristin back to the residence. He was leaving the party too and spotted them on his way back to his own dorm, Santa Lucia Hall. Once all 3 reached the Cal Poly campus, Davis left the group since he lived off campus. Now down to 3, Cheryl started to notice Paul's odd behavior. In her disposition, Cheryl remarked about the many stops made along the way. She also noted the familiar manner Paul had with Kristin. He held her around the waist, as Kristin wrapped her arms around his neck. Paul even suggested that Cheryl go ahead as they tried to catch up. Cheryl eventually went her own way, but not before double-checking with Paul about ensuring Kristin's safe return. Paul claimed he walked Kristin to the intersection of the hallways that led off to both their respective residence halls. This was around 2:30 a.m. on May 25, 1996. Kristin Smart has never been seen or heard from since then. When Sunday rolled around without a call from Kristin, Denise didn't grow immediately concerned. With Monday being a holiday, anything could have come up. Kristin's roommate and neighbor, however, found it unusual. They contacted the University Police Department to report Kristin missing. No report was taken. Concerned, they called Kristin's family and the San Luis Obispo Police Department. On May 27, 1996, Denise received a call from the UPD asking if Kristin had returned home for the weekend. She hadn't. The UPD only filed a missing persons report 3 days after her last sighting. Kristin's roommate, Crystal Calvin, revealed that none of her personal belongings were missing. This suggested to authorities that Kristin probably didn't make it back to her room. Paul Flores was now a person of interest. He was the last known person to see Kristin. 5 days after Kristin went missing, Paul was interviewed by the UPD investigators. He told investigators they both went their own directions at the intersection. Investigators, however, were quick to notice Paul's black eye. When asked about it, Paul said he was elbowed in the face during a basketball game. A friend later refuted this story. He insisted that the black eye was there before the basketball game. Paul allegedly told him he didn't know how he got the black eye. He just woke up with it. A month later, in June, Paul was interviewed again, this time confessing he lied about the black eye incident. Paul changed his story. He apparently hit his eye on the steering wheel of a truck. When questioned further, Paul said that the story sounded unlikely. Paul told investigators he was in his truck at around 2 a.m. on the morning of May 27, 1996, installing a car radio because he was selling his truck. Family lawyer for the Smarts, James R. Murphy Jr., said Paul was last seen with Kristin after the party. His injuries looked consistent with those of someone involved in an altercation. Cadaver dogs were called in to assist in the search for Kristin on June 29, 1996. 4 dogs trained to search for human remains were used individually to search Santa Lucia Hall. Each dog alerted to room 128, Paul Flores' room. The dogs showed no interest apart from the corner of one mattress, a mattress Flores told investigators belonged to him. CARTA dog handler Adela Morris said cadaver dogs can detect the slightest physiological changes. Their reactions during the search indicated a strong possibility of a dead body being in room 128. A second handler, Gail LaRoque, recalled the behavior of her boxer, Tori. When allowed to search, Tori repeatedly searched the left side of room 128, the side used by Paul Flores. The dog's behavior and strong reaction indicated she found a scent but was still searching for its source. Paul Flores remained the strongest suspect. Nobody meant no formal charge. Paul went on to live his life as a free man shrouded in a cloak of suspicion. From 1996 through 2007, investigations continued. Searches were conducted in all possible locations, including 4 properties owned by the Flores family. None of them yielded any positive results. On the advice of his lawyer, Paul Flores pleaded the Fifth. The Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution protects individuals from incriminating themselves. The person who invokes this clause cannot be compelled to provide information that they feel could incriminate them further. Paul therefore had the right to remain silent during his 1997 deposition. Attorney James R. Murphy hit a brick wall. Paul's silence and refusal to cooperate left investigators scrambling for new leads. Although all evidence led back to Paul, former Sheriff Ed Williams himself said he saw no way of completing the case. Authorities were getting frustrated. The Smarts took it upon themselves to file a wrongful death charge. The court, however, decided against proceeding with the charges. Kristin's case was still an active criminal investigation. Paul and his family refused to publicly address the case of Kristin Smart or the accusations against them. Although Derek Tse, one of Paul's roommates, said Paul allegedly joked about Kristin's disappearance, these allegations remained speculation, as Paul shielded himself against further questioning by lawyering up. 6 years after going missing, on May 25, 2002, with no remains having been found, Denise Smart confessed it was a bittersweet moment of closure. Then Chris Lambert broke the silence. Chris was 8 years old when Kristin went missing. Haunted by the ever-looming billboard over Arroyo Grande, Chris found himself asking why there were still no answers all these years later. Hearing about Kristin's disappearance at a young age frightened him. Chris became fixated by the case. In May 2018, he quit his job at a musical instrument shop to work on the podcast full-time. With no formal training in law or journalism, He was driven only by a passion for answers. He began asking questions to see if he could get people talking. In 2019, Chris's determination paid off. He decided to visit the memorial to Kristin on Shell Beach on her birthday, February 20th. Armed with a cell phone, Chris waited to meet someone willing to talk about Kristin. As luck would have it, he ran into Kristin's mom there and was able to talk with her about her daughter. From there on, Chris and the Smarts developed a strong relationship and worked on getting Kristin's story out to the public. The podcast, In Your Own Backyard, took on a life of its own. What started as a local series exploded onto the national scene. To date, it has raked in over 11 million downloads. The podcast follows the case of Kristin Smart and her disappearance from the Cal Poly campus. Chris had a knack for getting people to talk to him. He was able to obtain interviews with people related to the case to varying degrees. Chris searched for witnesses that were reluctant to speak or overlooked by investigators. He was able to uncover multiple allegations that remained mere speculations over the years. A former colleague of Paul's mother, Susan, claimed she complained about not sleeping well after her husband got a call in the middle of the night during the Memorial Day weekend. He left in his car after the call. Another claim came from one of Susan's tenants. This time, the tenant told Chris that every morning after Kristin's disappearance at 4:20 a.m., an alarm would go off from the area of the backyard. A third interview with an Australian exchange student brought to the forefront a possible altercation between Kristin and Paul. According to Chris, the student alleged to have seen Kristin fighting off Paul on the night she disappeared. In an effort to tie up all of the speculations made by people interviewed by Chris, certain theories were highlighted. The first being that Paul got a black eye during a tussle with Kristin. The second, that Paul's father, Ruben Flores, helped cover up the crime. And the third, that the body of Kristin Smart was buried in the backyard of the Flores home. Another disturbing development in his investigation was that Chris uncovered allegations of gross misconduct by Paul over the years. Women who went to school or worked with Paul reported his overly flirtatious behavior and excessive drinking habits. 4 women approached the Daily Beast, alleging Paul had sexually or physically assaulted them. An ex-girlfriend even went as far as to claim that Paul brandished a butter knife in her face during a fight. 13 more women had accusations leveled against Paul, including predatory behavior, harassment, and sexual assault. Although Chris has made 2 attempts to contact Paul, he had no success. He figured an interview could tie up loose ends, but more importantly, it would give Paul a chance to explain the allegations against him and give his side of the story. However, he refutes the claim that Chris tried making contact with her family. Susan stated she could shoot plenty of holes into Chris's investigation. Sheriff Ian Parkinson of the San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Department credits Chris for helping move the investigation forward. Parkinson commended Chris on putting together a well-done podcast. He said getting the story out there persuaded people to come forward, the value of which has been a game changer. Denise Smart also credited Chris, saying, "The stars aligned when the podcast aired." Denise further thanked Parkinson for putting vigor back into the case of Kristin since taking office in 2011. Despite the continued silence of the Flores family, the investigations along with the podcast shook their precarious foundation. On January 29, 2020, 2 trucks owned by Paul were taken into evidence. On February 5th of that same year, search warrants for specific items of evidence were issued for 4 different locations. This included a home in Los Angeles. Paul was briefly detained while the search was carried out. By April 22, 2020, the Los Angeles Times reported that a search warrant was served at the home of Paul Flores in San Pedro, California. Items of interest were successfully retrieved during the search, including date rape drugs and videos of Paul sexually assaulting young women. Paul was then arrested on February 11, 2021, in Ranchos Palos Verdes, California, on suspicion of being a felon in possession of a firearm. In March of the same year, a search warrant was issued for the home of Paul's father, Ruben Flores, using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar to carry out the property search. An older model Volkswagen was towed away for evidence after a search conducted by the dogs. On April 13th, Paul and his father Ruben were taken into custody by San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department in relation to Kristin's case. Paul was charged with murder and Ruben with being an accessory after the fact. Paul may have gotten away with a charge of sexual assault due to the statute of limitations, but murder committed during a rape or attempted rape still carries a first-degree felony murder charge. In September 2021, a judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial. Set to begin in April 2022, the trial was delayed and moved to Monterey County. The trial began on July 18, 2022. Paul and Ruben are being tried separately with two different sets of jurors, but at the same time. Opening statements made by San Luis Obispo County Deputy District Attorney Chris Povrel painted a picture of a young life lost too soon. Povrel described to the jurors a family mourning their daughter's unknown whereabouts and the evil that is Paul Flores. He added that evidence found at his father Ruben's house suggested both men were responsible for the death and subsequent disposal of Kristin's body. Paul's defense attorney, Robert Sanger, called that evidence into question. He said it was a tragic situation, that Kristin's body was never found, nor was any DNA evidence. He stated it is believed she is deceased, but there is no evidence of what happened to her after Paul left her at her dorm. Since July, the trial has seen accusations of predatory behavior and violence leveled against Paul Flores. Many women have come forward accusing Paul of harassment and inappropriate sexual misconduct. Two women who were referred to as Rhonda Doe and Sarah Doe gave testimony of their encounters with Paul. Both women alleged they felt uncharacteristically drunk after meeting Paul. Large chunks of their memories were lost, and both described waking up to Paul abusing them. Their graphic testimonies brought jurors to tears, prompting Judge Jennifer O'Keefe to call for a recess. Testimony surrounding the search of Ruben Flores' home caused another juror to break down. With testimony from investigators and experts, many graphic details are being recounted. Judge O'Keefe stated that it was a long, hard trial, and sometimes things are emotional. It was not unusual for jurors to break down emotionally. Damning evidence came in the form of one Jennifer Hudson. Hudson took to the stand explaining how she encountered Paul and his friends while skateboarding. She was 17 years old at the time. Previous court papers stated that Hudson alleged Paul remarked he had buried Kristin beneath his ramp in his backyard in Hawasna. This was allegedly said while they were together during a public service announcement of Kristin's disappearance. Sanger, defense attorney for Paul, questioned the relevance of her statements. He pointed out her recreational use of drugs and alcohol, questioning her reliability. He implied she was not answering truthfully according to a transcript of her tweets. Hudson acknowledged her lack of action in notifying police. She said she only came forward after the podcast was aired. She further admitted that she canceled an interview with a detective after meeting the producer of the podcast in 2019. Sanger further questioned Hudson on whether she thought Kristin Smart was buried in Susan Flores' backyard. She reportedly responded, "That made the most sense." When Sanger pursued that Hudson had affiliations with motorcycle gang members, the line of questioning was objected to by prosecutors, the judge siding with the prosecution. During a cross-examination by Povrel, he asked Hudson to explain a previous statement in which she said she felt responsible for the misery of the Smart family. Hudson responded by stating that had she not been a coward, she would have come forward earlier. After her testimony, Hudson reportedly broke down in tears. Unexpectedly, court proceedings were halted after Hudson's testimony. No reason given by the judge. The trial is expected to continue through September 2022. For the Smart family, an emotional decades-long search for the truth is finally coming to an end, yet their heartbreak over losing their daughter never will. For other victims of Paul Flores, old wounds are being reopened. For Chris Lambert, the quest for justice has finally begun. Kristin Smart can finally rest at peace as her killer may soon be held accountable. No longer just a face on a billboard, Kristin's story is being laid bare for all to hear and for all to share in the triumph and relief of seeing her killer face his just dues. What do you think of the trial of Kristin Smart? Are podcasts paving the way for a new method of crime-solving investigations? Let us know in the comments below. Until then, stay safe